Welcome to Plática with Adelita, where we discuss issues that our community is facing here in Pima County and how we can work together to ensure we discuss and overcome challenges together. Today, we'll be talking about period poverty and menstrual equity. Period poverty is an important yet often ignored public health crisis. Menstruating is not a choice. We don't choose to get our periods, and it's often not something we talk about in public or private. Period poverty is when people who need products like pads, tampons, or liners to manage menstrual bleeding are unable to afford them. There are many obstacles to equal access to menstrual products. The high cost, which includes sales taxes, reduced access to these products in prisons and jails, the exemption of menstrual products from public health benefits programs to contribute to this inequity. Pads and tampons are also not freely available in schools, homeless shelters, and other public areas. And if they are available, you have to go through a process in order to get them. They're not just like right outside, in the bathroom area. Students, low income and homeless women and girls, transgender and non-binary individuals, and those who currently are in prison struggle with period poverty. For many, the price of a box of pads or tampons is exorbitant, and with 35 states, including Arizona, viewing these items as luxury goods and imposing sales tax, also known as the tampon tax or menstrual hygiene products. Access to menstrual items is a human right, and everyone who menstruates deserves to have a period with dignity. That is why District 5 introduced a proclamation to the Board of Supervisors on May 3rd, 2022, declaring May 23rd through May 29th Period Poverty Awareness Week, and are working with community partners to host a period product donation drive. In honor of this special week, we invited some wonderful folks today to discuss period poverty and its impact on our friends, family, and community. We are joined by Leslie Pike, Manager of Programs at the Diaper Bank of Southern Arizona, Amanda Monroy, Public Health Policy Manager for the Pima County Health Department, and Joanne Thayes, Nurse Assistant for TUSD, and she is currently right now staffing the office like she always does. So sometime during this period of time, she'll probably have to shut off her camera and deal with what the reality is, which is students are coming in with urgent issues. And so we understand that. And thank you all for your time and being here. And I'm glad that you're all here so we can learn more about this issue and how to get involved and make an impact. I'm going to ask each of these amazing panelists to introduce themselves and speak to how period poverty impacts you, your constituents, or community. And since it's a little quiet over there at the school, I'm going to start with Joanne. We'll start with you. You're muted. There you go.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name's Joanne Thayes. I am the health assistant here at Wakefield Middle School. I've been a health assistant for like 7 years now, and I really love working with the students, the parents, and TUSD is a great school district.
And you do a great job.
Thank you so much.
As one of the parents you communicate with, you do a great job.
Thank you.
And so how has period poverty impacted you, your community, or your school site?
We are a low socioeconomic community area, so I know that the feminine supplies are not always accessible. They're not always available to our community. And we many times ask for donations because there's a little bit of a shortage. Some of the students come in and they're not sure how to use the products. I think it's something that parents don't openly discuss with all the students. Sometimes they ask for advice on how to, use the pads. So it'd be great to have that availability to ask for some donations or for some assistance with more feminine supplies.
We will absolutely get those to you. That is not a problem. I will pay for them myself. Amanda, you just hosted a lunch and learn for Pima County employees on period poverty. And I learned a lot because it is, again, like Joanne mentioned, it's not something we talk about all the time. So how has period poverty impacted you, the community, your job?
Yeah, so hi everyone, Amanda Monroy. I was joking around with Adelita earlier that this is my favorite topic to talk about. It is something I have been involved with Since grad school, really, looking at what period poverty looks like here in a high school in Tucson, and how young menstruators were dealing with the issue of menstruation and its impact on being in school and what it was like to menstruate in school. Then with that, I've worn a couple of different hats in the community, former D5er.
You're always a D5er once you're a D5er.
Oh yeah, and that's where I kind of started with this government involvement, my government self-involved in menstrual equity, with bringing awareness to it. And I think with me, I've been fortunate enough not to experience period poverty myself, but through research and through my job, have seen that it really is an issue that impacts menstruators young, and towards the end of their menstrual life cycle, when it comes to access and their social and economic mobility. And I think that's why it's been so important to me to really highlight it in a formal public health space more recently.
Well, thank you, Amanda. And I think that, I learned a lot, and I know that people that joined there did. And I think it's a topic that, as you mentioned during the Lunch and Learn, we have to continue to talk about, because so many don't. Leslie, how has this issue affected you, your constituents, and community?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be on this panel. So as a staff member of the Diaper Bank of Southern Arizona, I am currently very passionate about this topic because at the Diaper Bank, we provide essential supplies. Excuse me, silence that. We provide essential supplies to the community when they have need, and that is our mission. And so, of course, we started off as providing diapers for parents who needed diapers for their children. We expanded into adult incontinence supplies, and we still do that. And then, we became a member of the Alliance for Period Supplies, which is a national organization that advocates for access to these supplies. Now, on a more personal note, I'd like to say that so being an older woman who no longer needs these supplies, I remember when I did have my period, almost every public restroom and restrooms in schools were equipped with machines, dispensing machines, where you could easily access products. It was no less difficult, or maybe embarrassing, or even in some times shameful, to have to go ask people or a nurse or anybody else, for these supplies when you really needed them. And that wonderful accessibility of going to a machine and just getting what you needed without having to make a big dramatic production over what you needed. That was significant. And I've noticed over the decades, my goodness, you don't see those kind of access points anymore. I don't know what happened in our society that led to the breakdown of that particular system. But what we find ourselves in now is when we talk about period poverty, we're talking about not just not being able to afford them, but not having even access to them. And among the people that we're serving directly, who need these products, no other social safety net helps. You can't buy them with other social funding, or it becomes rather expensive, and it's not always a wise use of your money. And we know from all of the families that we serve, especially the moms, the young moms, they're sacrificing everything for their children. They're doing everything they can for their children. And so if it's a difference between buying your daughter menstrual supplies or diapering your baby and buying supplies for yourself, you are going to make do without. And so that's just an important thing that we hear a lot from families when we're offering period supplies, that, oh my gosh, yes, can I also get some for my oldest daughter? If one woman in the household is not adequately supplied in this way, every menstruator in the house is not adequately supplied. So.
Do you, and any of you can always chime in, do you feel like students in the public are well aware of the menstrual hygiene, the issues and the access to period products? Do you think that because I know from last year when we did this drive, a lot of people didn't realize that it was such an issue until you start talking to people. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it is an issue because, as mentioned earlier, the state that are funding thinks that it's a luxury to have a pad. So what do you think are some things that we need to do to help raise awareness and draw attention to these issues?
Amanda, do you want to go first? Because you're really one of the spearheads on this movement here.
Oh, that's really kind of you, Leslie. I'll take a stab at it. So I just do want to highlight what's really amazing about the current menstrual equity movement is that it's really a youth-led movement. There's a lot of really strong youth organizers here in the state and across the country who are really mobilizing to remove the shame and stigma away from menstruation and really call for calls of menstrual equity, which is like as accessible as toilet paper, to remove these luxury tax items. But that there is still a lot of education that needs to happen in the greater population, and even with our young menstruators. I think, as Joanne was mentioning, is that a lot of parents don't even know the language to use with their menstruators to talk to them about their cycle. And then when they go to school and they're in health class, it's the biological process and it's left at that. And there's no normalization of you need to visit everyone's cycle. And for me, what I love to say is I love to go into rooms and be like, it's crazy. It's like, we're really comfortable, handing out things for safe sex and having this conversation about safe sex, but we don't seem to be as comfortable to hand out the tampon and talk about menstruation. And it really is the start of the whole process. And it's really the start of normalizing one's relationship with their own reproductive health. And it's just really eye-opening to be in spaces with other menstruators too and be like, you know what, I'm going to say tampon, I'm going to say pad, and I am going to hold my tampon out when I walk to the bathroom, because I know those little actions help to make and remove some of the stigma and shame that we've just been conditioned to operate with it.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because in some families, this isn't a subject that is talked about. I think that even purchasing of products, it's like, can you get me some? And I'm like, you need to articulate the words because it's not a bad thing. But I think my family is the exception because my mom is one of five. She has five, there's five of them total. So 4 sisters. And then I'm one of 3 that, in our family, the day after our first period, we inundate that baby with welcome to the club and balloons and flowers. And, I remember at the time it was embarrassing. And now that I think about it, it's just like, this is the club. This is you should celebrate it because it's going to happen every month. And it's not always the funnest thing, but it's not anything to be ashamed of. And so if any of you want to share what the experience was like for you, I know when I was talking to some of my friends, their moms are really uncomfortable talking about it. They don't talk about it. And so you go to the nurse's office and ask questions that I'm sure Joanne is surprised about on a regular basis on how little some of our younger students, how little they know about the issue.
And I started my menstrual cycle that no one had spoken to me about it at all. So I ran home after school worried I was dying because I was, menstruating. And so then I went home and told my grandmother, something's wrong. Can you call 911 because I'm bleeding? And she's like, oh, okay, no, this and this and this. But I wasn't prepared. We didn't have pads. We just used toilet tissue. And, it wasn't talked about it. We didn't talk about it any further after that. And I think that's what I see here. A lot of times the kids are really embarrassed to speak about it. They're not sure what to do. So I gently go over it with them. And hopefully that changes, in the near future.
Yeah, I hope so.
I also think I was a mother of boys. My own childhood, my mother was very open and she was very much interested in educating us about real things. And that was never more like not a celebration like Adelita, but not getting told anything like Joanne went through. which is really hard, for girls to face on their own. But one thing, having raised boys, what I really wanted them to know, I wanted them to know about it so that there would be no teasing, no mystery, no jumping on the bandwagon of hounding a young menstruator down a school hallway because she had started bleeding. I wanted my sons to understand, that, and they do, and they've always, I think, dealt rationally with the topic. They need to know too, right? They need to understand that this is just a part of life, being in this body, and I think that's also part of the de-shaming process too, is to include our non-menstruators in this process as well. Just, the more education we have, the better off we all are.
I think that's great. So how can we normalize this topic and issue, aside from some of the things I think we're already doing and bringing attention to it? What are some other ways that our community can normalize this topic of menstruating?
I mean, talking about it really, and providing space for those who menstruate to talk about it, but also provide space for those who don't to come into the conversation. Someone who grew up in the Arizona public school system, I remember in 4th grade, they said, boys go here, girls go here. And I think it's like Leslie was saying, it's like we need to be educating everyone about this process, because it really does impact everybody, because when 50% of your population's social and economic mobility can be greatly impacted, as well as their health and well-being, that's everyone's problem, and everyone needs to be aware of it. And I think also it's really important to understand how we communicate with our medical professionals, and how we don't just blow off pain and discomfort as being like, oh, well, they're just on their period, right? Because that's the other danger of, being like, oh, it's just your period. There are different ranges of pain and normal, but we need to also understand how we listen to menstruators and understand that they are the ones who know their bodies and know what's happening with their cycle the best.
Yeah. And I do think that, if you look at this issue, the overregulation of our bodies that's happening at the state level and happening at the federal level, I think periods get swept up in some of that, where it's like, oh, it's a woman's issue, so we don't have to talk about it. And so we just push it away. And I was on the board when we were talking about the family life curriculum that covers just some of the basics of your body, like body parts. I mean, it's very scientific discussion. It's just factual. It's not taking an interpretation of anything, not talking about sexuality. We're just talking about bodies, and we still have to get permission slips, active permission slips from parents in order to have a conversation. And we hear from a lot of parents that don't want this topic discussed at schools at all, any portion of it. Well, it's my child and I want to raise them. Like, what do you understand how few parents have a real honest conversation with their children about any of these issues that have to do with just the biology of your body, So that to me is very frustrating. So, Joanne, what do you see your role in working with the schools and the public regarding menstrual equity? And then I'll turn that question over to Amanda.
Well, I know that here at the school we offer not only pads but also tampons, and there's been some issues among staff that have made comments. Wow, you offer tampons, and they feel that maybe parents may not agree with us offering a tampon and the student using it, but that's a fine line. I'm not sure how to. If a student asks about it, of course, I feel that I will call parent and see if it's okay if they use a tampon versus a pad. But I mean, since it's not talked about at home and they come in here so often with, needing direction, I do the best I can. It's hush hush at this point, 2022.
That's fascinating to me, that it's okay to use a pad, but not a tampon, or maybe not a cup. To me, I'm just like, It's part of your body. Stop acting as if a tampon has anything to do with anything other than being a product to make sure that you can menstruate
I
hygienically.
think it's a little bit of not knowing. Maybe the parent feels that, inserting a tampon may affect their, as far as their virginity, something to that effect. I think that's the main reason.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. It's just frustrating.
Mhm.
Amanda, did you want to tag on to anything? And then I'll call on Leslie.
I mean, I just want to say this all just goes back to how we educate about menstruation in a medically and scientifically accurate way, and also make the information accessible and understandable too, right? So not making it too medical and scientific in language, and that it's isolating to folks, because we still want to invite folks into the conversation. But with every health issue, is like we need to take into account, how do we communicate this to the public that's being impacted by the issue, so they're fully equipped with all the information they need to make the best decisions about their menstrual cycle, because there are real health impacts if you can't adequately manage your menstrual cycle. There's sepsis, there's toxic shock, and other maybe bacterial infections that may happen if you're overusing or misusing products, or the products incorrectly. And I think that's really what we have to go back to, is that there are health consequences to the menstruator when they are leaving a tampon in too long, or they don't have access even to the hygienic absorbing materials that are available.
Yeah.
It'd be great if we could send out some materials to parents, but I don't know how that would come across, like exactly on what you're talking about. I think maybe we'd get a lot of feedback, a negative feedback, as far as, what are you teaching my child, etc. But like Amanda said, I think she's 100% on it. Yeah, that is exactly. If we could put that in writing and send notification to the parents, I think that'd be a great idea. But
maybe
I don't think society's ready.
Like a boot camp for incoming, middle school parents, even though, or outgoing 5th grade parents, like elementary, because that's around the age, right, between 10 and the age fluctuates depending on the child. So, as young as 9, even 8, and then, you have some that are a little older, like 13. But even if we're just having the conversation, by the way, this is an issue that's going to come up this year if it hasn't already. So let's talk about it. Leslie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. One thing that occurs to me too, and what we've seen is, I think what we're playing here is a long game. On the other, one hand, as Joanne had mentioned, it's 2022. Seriously, are we really just addressing the basics in our community? Are we still just, dragging people to this conversation? Is it true that people don't know these things? Like the issue of using a tampon, and does it affect your virginity? We're looking at these topics in 2022. But let's face it, as women, we know that women's health has not been addressed by the medical disciplines or the medical research fields as strenuously. We are categorized under so many men's health research objectives. So what it takes is really playing the long game and just doing whatever we can to get the message out there that this matters, that it's something that we can address, and that it's something good and positive for everybody in society. And we'll just keep pecking away. And I think every period supply drive, every raising awareness effort, every dissertation and master's thesis, and every effort we make to try to communicate things clearly, we make an impact, and that will spread.
Yeah. So what's something about that you've learned about menstrual equity that surprised you? Because to me, what's been really surprising is how, especially for our younger menstruators, how little information they have. In general, they just don't have information. They don't know about it. It's always a surprise. And it fascinates me, because we hear from so many parents who don't want schools to move into that arena of talking about their bodies. That's not your job. Your job is to just talk about math, English, science. We'll take care of that. And how many of those children come to school with zero knowledge of what's going on with their own bodies.
I kind of think it's, if I just briefly, I just want to say that I think it's really important to have cross-cultural dialogue about this, because there's so many cultures that have very different understandings and protocols and traditions around menstrual cycles. I think what would be so wonderful is if we had a big collective cross-cultural dialogue about what menstruation is in my home, in my culture, in my neighborhood, and hear one another talk about that, because it can be so wildly different. And I think that's part of what creates the confusion and unwillingness to have a school address it, or another agency address it, Wouldn't it be interesting to just get all of us together and sit around and talk about what these stories are and what matters to us? Why is it important the way we do things?
Yeah. One of the slides that Amanda had during her Lunch and Learn, that a single menstruator will use between 5,000 and 15,000 pads and tampons over their life. Like, that was a huge number for me. And I didn't have a number for that. That was one of my little tidbits that I learned. And so, why do you feel issues like period poverty persist in our community when this is the kind, over half of us are menstruating or will menstruate?
That's the golden question, right? And I think that really you have to look at what we've been signaled by, the larger, marketing and society and cultural norms about menstruation. For the longest time, I think we all remember the Always ads, right? Where it was blue liquid getting poured onto the pad, and everyone's like, why is it blue? Like, okay, I guess there's finally now just movement to have the liquid be red, because it's actually, unless I guess you're an avatar, you're not going to be blue. And I think we have to think about it that way, right? Like, there was that new Disney movie, Turning Red. I watched that as, I'm in my late 20s, and I watched it and I was like, oh my God, there's a cartoon and they have tampons and pads, and
yeah,
it was refreshing and shocking and great. And I just think we're finally getting to a place in the greater discourse to be able to talk about it. And we need to acknowledge that there were, the past how many years where it wasn't normalized, and it wasn't. And, even my generation, I was just like, they're like, oh, yep, this is what happens. And this is why you get a period, and we're not going to talk about it again.
Right.
And
we're not going to talk about it.
We're not going to talk about it again until you have to do your next level of health ed in 7th grade. And if you got your period in 3rd grade, oops, you waited until 4th. So I think there was just the lack of acknowledgement that this is just normal. And because of that, our policies and economic system is just set up to not normalize it. That's why they're classified as a luxury item. Because for the longest time, it wasn't seen as a normal biological, medical even necessity to have these materials.
And also, what I see here at the middle school, that nowadays there's a lot of students that are being raised by grandma, an older aunt, not the younger generation of mom and dad. And so when these students are dealing with their menstrual cycles, it's still very minimal information. And some of the students come in here and just, they don't even know which way to turn the pad. It's still in the package. So they need thorough explanation, just no information, education whatsoever. I feel that, it's, if they have the younger, 20 or 30-year-old parent, maybe there would be a little bit more information, but that's our society now. A lot of grandmothers are raising the kids. So.
And I think that's that like the taboo topic, right? Because I remember my
Mhm.
nana would never talk about it ever.
No.
Like she'd ask my mom stuff, but she would never ask us directly because, that's like too sensitive. The information was too sensitive. And like when I would spend the night there and needed a pad, I would dread it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to ask her and it's going to be like a big drama. And then, even when I remember when I needed pads, I didn't want my dad to buy them. And
Oh yeah.
and it was like this built-in sort of like, why am I embarrassed of it? And so I'm trying to change that for my children, but it's one of those things where you just default to like, oh, it's secret. Mom will do it. You don't do it. It's like, your father goes shopping. He does most of the shopping. So he's going to pick them up on the way. Yeah. And one of the other things is that when you're looking for specifics, so some of the times you're looking for different sizes because depending on the age and, sometimes you need just like a liner versus, if you're older, like I needed like much things that were more absorbent. And so when we look at those things and you look at how they're packaged and that you get so much less for a smaller size and it's really expensive and and I can see why, you buy the big generic ones as a family, you buy like the bigger ones because they're generic. And then you have young ladies that would probably in the family will probably not want to wear
big
the
bulky
ones to school because it makes you walk funny or you can't run track or, so I do think there's a lot of things that we really need to talk about. And it's an issue that continues. So I guess I'm wondering, what is something that you wish everyone knew on the issue of period poverty? Like, are there misconceptions that you would like to address about period poverty? Any of you can jump in. I think for me, it's the fact that, even in families, when you're making decisions, when you look at like the price of everything and gas is so expensive and food is so expensive, but most people, their salaries have stayed fairly consistent. It does in a family become a luxury item. And that's where I think it becomes very problematic, and our responsibility as a community to figure out a way to fund some of the schools, like the school Joanne is teaching in, where they don't have them, or some of the buildings where we don't have products accessible for a nominal fee or free.
We try to challenge businesses. We're trying to encourage businesses to place period supplies in their restrooms to make them available. And of course, we try to make, along with the YWCA, we try to make these things available. I think the thing that I want, if I could have a big megaphone and people would listen to something that they don't consider, it's misinformation. It's just misinformation all around. It's the young menstruator who has no idea what's going on, or the parent who's too embarrassed to talk with them, or not sure how to talk with a child about this. To young and middle-aged and older men who know very little and find that it's not a topic they want to hear about. It's all around misinformation. And when you think about how long women have been on this earth bleeding every month, this should not be the case, right? This should just not be the case. So, I would just say to everybody, say period out loud and then be willing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But some of these businesses supply condoms openly, and why can't they do the same for menstrual pads and put some, advertise it a little bit more?
Excellent point.
Right. And I think, just to tie a bow around this, it's the intersectionality of this issue, right? It's just this issue truly does go beyond just getting a pad or tampon. We need to look at the intersections that are happening around the not being able to get it in the first place, B, the taboos and the systems in which we're operating and menstruating in, and how can we make them more friendly? Like, how can we make school environments more friendly? You hear like, how comfortable are young menstruators approaching maybe a male presenting teacher? and having to maybe have to be asked why they're going to the bathroom every day during that class that week. And also thinking is like, we just expect menstruators to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
When students come in here and there's other students in here and it's a female and she needs a feminine product, she'll come all the way to my desk and whisper, I need to go to the bathroom. I need a pad. It's like this big secret. And if I were to put some posters up on the walls, I don't know how well that would go over. So I get parents in here and, about menstrual and, maybe even in the bathroom that it's co-ed, putting some instructions on how to, apply a pad and, et cetera. I don't know. I don't know if society's really ready for that.
I think we just have to push them into it. I do. I really do. Because you shouldn't have to give that kind of instruction, especially if young learners can look at it themselves. I was always a visual. So I was always looking at the back of the package, like, how does this work? Because when someone would tell me, even now, if someone just tells me something, it doesn't always register the same.
And then since boys and girls use the same bathroom, I think if I've thought of putting like instructions on the wall, but I think that it'd be a big deal in school that the boys would be talking and making fun of the girls and you'd have the girls crying and, it's just.
And you work in a middle school, so that adds a whole other layer of everything's a little different.
Yes.
Right. Amanda?
Yeah. And I think just going back to also just occurred to me with like this discussion, I think, Joanne, you mentioned that like there's a lot of places that hand out condoms.
Yes.
I mean, I guess my challenge would be is if you're handing out a condom, why not hand out a tampon?
Yes.
So a lot of this too is reframing the whole topic of reproductive health of, that's this, gender's issue and this gender's issue is it all needs to be intersectional and inclusive. And if you, are engaging in sexual activity, like, what it's possible that one of the partners may be menstruating at some point.
Yes.
So there are these avenues also into other spaces where we're already having health related conversations where we could also bring in conversations about menstruation. Because again, that's why I would challenge, maybe even, my field of public health and the medical field is like, how can we better engage and normalize menstruation?
Yes.
Because it is biology. It is an issue of health. And in order to have great health as a menstruator, you really need to understand your cycle to its fullest extent.
And there also needs to be room, though. I mean, I'm really thinking about the middle school person who needs to whisper what they need. But, at those adolescent ages, there's so many changes going on with your psychology and your body. Much of it feels very embarrassing. And it's not all to do with somebody shaming you for having a period. You just internally feel a bit, like, not wanting to do everything about yourself, every personal issue. But there have to be discrete ways to not encourage people to feel ashamed about it, and maybe just kind of slowly talk them out of feeling ashamed about it. Frankly, it's a little unrelated, but kind of not, is that we find this is also true with adults who suffer with incontinence. And the shame factor is huge. And where you have to just kind of tease it out. What do you need? How can we help you? Or sometimes, as you say, Adelita, you just push it. You just say, okay, let's quit being embarrassed about this. This is a fact. 50% of all adults go through this. Let's fix it. Let's figure out what we can do.
We're getting there.
My aunt Sissy, I always think of her in these topics because she was just so no nonsense. There was no filter. And I find myself, the older I get, just like, I'm just going to say it because it's like, we've been so delicate about a lot of issues. And I would rather be that one that just sort of says like, no, this is not okay. And I think, there's a handful of us, we just continue to do it and more people will join us, I think. So I'm always curious about this because, with all of you in very diverse backgrounds, what got you involved in the work that you do today? And I'll go ahead and start with Leslie and then Amanda and then Joanne.
Okay, so I've for a lot of my life worked with nonprofit agencies or mission-based agencies. I did a spell at TUSD for about 10 or 12 years as well. And so, yeah, I think that's what drives me is being able to do work that has a mission around it and is a contributor to society, is something that's supportive of society. And the diaper bank has been a marvelous experience for me for the last 8 years to be able to do that, to be able to contribute, to meet with wonderful people like you all, share ideas and try to address a serious issue.
Yeah, Amanda.
I guess I'll just talk about really because this is really a passion of mine. I would say that I've been fortunate enough that work has provided me some space to engage with it. But how my passion for this, I think, really got sparked was in, I think, grad school when I was first learning about the issue of how folks in, sub-Saharan Africa were dealing with menstruation, how it really was an inhibitor to accessing school, a way out of poverty, a way to understanding health and all that stuff. And in school, I was like, wait, I wonder what's going on in Tucson. And that's kind of what led me to looking at it domestically and getting involved in it here domestically, and what led to eventually my thesis being based on this issue, because it really is, if we are going to, have, we don't have the ERA or whatever, but if we're going to get towards, parity in pay and all these other socioeconomic issues that are associated with, women, is we need to look and see what might be causing those root causes of the lack of socioeconomic mobility and all that stuff. And I found menstruation to really be a keystone issue in the start of a lot of this, is that how does one's relationship with their menstrual cycle impact, their mental health? And how does that then trickle out? How does it impact their ability to concentrate in school? And then how does that trickle out? And then again, with health, if they are insured or underinsured, what does a bout of toxic shock or a sepsis or any other bacterial infection that may be caused to misuse, how does that then impact economic and social mobility? So it really, to me, became like the keystone of let's start. You can start at the beginning of it because we know roughly when it happens, and we know what we need to do to prevent the issues, because this is a preventative. Period poverty is preventative. We know what we need to do to address it, and it could have immense impacts for women's economic and social mobility when we do. And that's really what got me involved in the issue.
And you're very knowledgeable about the issue. Yeah. It's Joanne.
I've always liked working with kids. I used to work in dental for many years. Then I went to nursing school, and then I had a family life-changing event. So then I left nursing school, and this is the next best thing. I love what I do. I love sending out educational information to all the families in our community and working with the kids. And it's just very fulfilling for me.
Well, and you do everything in English and Spanish. And I think that that's a point that Leslie brought up, is that we have to really understand the cultural background in order to address some of these issues. Because for some, I know that my Nana, her mom never talked to her about it. So she never talked to her. I mean, there's a lot of those sort of generational kind of things. And periods seem to be one of those issues that people just don't talk about. And what I think is really telling and really speaks to what Amanda was talking about is that 84% of menstruating teens missed class or knew someone that did because they didn't have period products. And in a young person's life, 2,400 days, menstruators spend 2,400 days over their lifetime on their period. So if you think about that, especially, as it comes up monthly, I mean, I remember when I worked at Wakefield as a monitor, we have a lot of young people that were like, I can't run I can't because I only have this one pad. So I remember bringing them to school for them to school then.
Mhm.
And I think it's a real big issue. And I feel like we don't include our schools as much in a lot of those things, but we also have community colleges and the university, and some
Yes.
of those restrooms put the products out there, and we don't do it in our schools. And I feel like it's a supply issue, but it's something that we absolutely can address. So
Mhm.
since I'm still wearing this president of school board hat for a
Yeah.
couple more months, I'm definitely going to bring it up again. And so as we wrap up here, because we've been chatting for like 40-ish minutes, how can people get involved in making a difference in this issue? I am going to talk about the donation drive right after. But if anyone has anything else that they wanted to add in, feel free. I know it sounds like our schools need donations of
I know I
products.
looked into it this morning, and there's a Girls Helping Girls website that you can ask for donations. And there's also it's called the Period Pool Collection Project, where you can also get information and ask for donations. So I've sent out emails to both those sites today.
Nice.
Um, and then I would have to get approval maybe from my principal to see if maybe we could ask for donations along with the cases of water / menstrual feminine products. But
I think it should be part. I mean, if you can ask for crayons and markers, I think you can ask for that. Half of your students, at least half of your students need it, right?
Yes.
Right.
And I would just say for those of us who are just, individuals passionate about the issue who may not, be lucky enough to have platforms within their professional lives to work on this is we all love social media. Post about it. Start the dialogue with your friends. You'll be surprised about once you just open the door a little, how willing people are just engaged and how relieved they are to have these conversations. And that is the biggest thing we can do to doing the cultural shift needed to really address all the things we talked about today.
Yeah. Thank you. Leslie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think if people want to get involved, these ideas are great, and that's exactly how people can get involved. I would also say, educate yourself a little bit. There's a lot of information out there about the topic. There are groups, grassroots groups, lots of people working on this, and trying to move the needle a little bit on this issue and raising awareness, so you can host. We did one evening. We hosted that documentary that won the Academy Award, about periods and about the lack of access and supplies, and so that was a fun way to gather a group together to get educated, but also encouraging your local businesses, encouraging your maybe where you work, if they don't supply period supplies in both bathrooms, ask them to. People, or provide them yourself for a little while and see if other people jump on board. I think just having that basic, simple access is what's going to make a huge difference too, and demystify and de-shame the topic if they're just there.
Well, I want to thank you all so much, Leslie, Amanda, and Joanne. I know that you're all very busy, and I want to thank you for sharing your time and expertise and experience in this issue. I've learned a lot. I hope that people that are watching, when they watch, and we'll keep it on our website, so it'll be available. I hope they learn a lot as well. Unfortunately, this topic is not often discussed, as we mentioned, in public or private. And I'm grateful that we're here today to educate folks watching. To learn more about the work that people are doing in the community, we will include resources and the links to the Diaper Bank of Southern Arizona, the Pima County Health Department, the YWCA of Tucson, and the Alliance for Period Supplies. All of that information will be in the description with this video. We also strongly encourage you to donate to this coming week's Period Poverty Awareness Drive. Last year, we had an overwhelming amount of support, and we collected nearly 15,000 items. And it surprised me because it was the very first time that we put anything out. And I was just really shocked at how many people were willing to just throw in a couple packages of products. And so we're looking to do more this this time. We'll also strongly encourage you to donate, to please donate unused pads, liners, tampons, menstrual caps at a site near you. They include the District 5 office, YWCA, the Diaper Bank, Pima County Recorder's Office, Pima County One Stop, the Abrams Health Building, a dozen Pima County libraries westbound, Pop Cycle, Tucson City Council offices for Ward 1, 3, 5, and 6. And for a complete list of donation sites and their addresses, please visit adelitaesgrijalva.com, and then it's a /N-poverty. If you can't donate, consider sharing information about the drive online, asking friends and family to donate, or sharing this conversation. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone watching, and stay safe, my friend. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.